Hey everybody, welcome to our Facebook Live event today. Today is National Healthcare Decisions Day, and I am joined by Dr. Eric Bush, who is our Chief Medical Officer here at Hospice of the Chesapeake. So I want to say thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Yeah.
So what we're going to be talking about is a conversation about why it's important and what actually is making advanced directives and talking about advanced care planning and all that kind of stuff. So we're gonna sort of really focus on what the terms are and then why. Why does it matter that we do all these things? So thanks again for being here, because you've got an awesome perspective, and I really appreciate you taking the time to be here. So before all of that, if you guys know anyone that this information might be helpful for, please make sure that you like our video, share our video. We want to give a special shout out to the Wellness House of Annapolis, because they're doing a watch party this morning. So hi you guys, thanks for joining us.
Good morning.
And if you all have any questions while we're having this conversation, please make sure you can post it in the comment section. If we can't get to it while we're talking, we'll be sure to respond to you at another time. So all of that being said, I wanted to start with the terminology, like I said. So it's National Healthcare Decisions Day, and one of the things that you hear about is advanced care planning, advanced care directives. Can you kind of give me a little guidance what those mean?
Absolutely. And as you know, in medicine, a lot of times we use a lot of jargon, a lot of medicalese. So just to try to make it simple, advanced care planning is a process to help guide individuals with decision-making capacity to help them guide the future of their care should they be in a position at some point if they're no longer able to directly participate in it. And in essence, to make their wishes known. And so a comprehensive approach to advanced care planning is figuring out what kind of care an individual, what he or she would or wouldn't want, letting a particular person know that they're going to be their spokesperson or proxy, to share those feelings also not only with that person, with their family, with their loved ones, with their healthcare providers. And then the third step would be to put it down in an advanced directive, or which is really, again, an advanced directive is part of advanced care planning. And so advanced directives are really written documents that tend to be legal in nature, tend to be medical legal per se. And so there's two different kinds. There's instructive and there's proxies. So proxies, healthcare power of attorneys, and you do separate, at least in Maryland, we separate healthcare power of attorney from financial power of attorney.
So those are two different. I'm going to back up just 1 second. So advanced care planning, it sounds like it's sort of the thinking through, just sort of the what ifs almost. And then the advanced care directives is sort of gathering those thoughts and putting them down in writing. And then the other piece that you mentioned was the proxy, or the person. As part of that process, you kind of need to identify the person who could carry out those wishes for you. Exactly. And so may or may not be your spouse or other loved one. Really what you want to do is pick somebody who would serve your best interests. In essence, have what you have in mind for future direction of your care, whether it's escalation of care, de-escalation of care, focus on comfort, what have you. There's all kinds of different options out there. I'm sure it's a lot to think about. And it almost seems like everyone should do this, right? Like not necessarily, I'm sure because of your role, you see people, it really is necessary for if you have a serious or life-limiting illness, but any of us could be in a car accident or something, seriously could happen to us, seriously medical could happen to us.
Correct, absolutely. Unfortunately, anything could happen at any time. I could go out and drive my car and be in an accident and end up in a vegetative state. It's important to let your loved ones know what you would or wouldn't want, and what you'd want maybe in an acute setting versus longer term, depending on
acute just from the
I'm sorry. So
that's
acute.
All right.
So what you would want more
short.
immediately done.
Right.
So I could tell you if, for example, if I were in an auto accident, yes, I would want somebody to try to resuscitate me. Yes, I'd want somebody to try to bring me back. But if it was looking like I was going to be in a permanently vegetative state or something of that nature, where my quality of life is poor, I would not want that.
Right. So my thought is, honestly, people should kind of reflect and do this at different stages of life. Like where you are at 21 is really different than where you are at 71, right? Like there's, so this is something that isn't just a one and done. It's something that needs to sort of be revisited and updated and sort of with you on your journey through life, because your wants and needs kind of change.
Absolutely. And so what I like to think of it analogous to is financial planning.
Okay.
And so just like your financial planning at 18, 21, 40, 50, 60,
your goals are different.
Varies. You have different goals.
Right.
So should your goals for having a conversation, for putting down your wishes, for doing advanced care planning, for doing your advanced directives. They should change over time. And that you're right, this is not something that's a one and done.
Yeah.
People should continue to review it as time goes on and things change for them. Fortunately, there's a lot of great resources out there.
Yeah.
There's the Conversation Project, which is basically just how to have the conversation.
Right.
Other things you may read is, people watch TV a lot of times Law and Order, you see certain situations, and those are great conversation starters to, start to talk about these things, because unfortunately, at some point when somebody loses that capacity to make those decisions, then you have to know that you did the best you could to relay what you would or wouldn't want. And really that's relieving the burden off your loved ones. That's really one of the great things about having a conversation earlier. And again, some of the tools that are out there, there's a site called prepareforyourcare.org, which is a great site, really takes you step by step, written in several different languages, very clear, and just takes you through as part of the process so you can clearly delineate what you would or wouldn't want done and who you want making decisions for you.
To you.
Correct.
So just so you all know, all the resources that we're mentioning today, we'll be sure to be putting the links up on our Facebook page and through this comments section. So just if you didn't catch that, we'll be sure to share those resources with you. I want to back up a second to the terminology again. So we were talking a little bit about advanced care directives, and part of that being when you're writing it down. So I just want to back up to that a little bit. And in Maryland, there's two ways you mentioned. So there's the, I just think it's important to revisit that a little bit.
In Maryland, one of the things that's legally binding is 5 wishes.
Okay.
And you can even go and Google 5 wishes, and it's great because it asks you who you would want to make decisions for you, what kind of care you would want, what do you want comfort care, what is your focus for treating things such as pain, and that's binding. And then there's also, delineating a proxy, or in essence, not necessarily laying all those things out step by step. You can do that with a proxy, or you can just have a proxy or somebody serve to make decisions on your behalf, should you no longer be able to.
So that's the who that you've identified.
Correct.
That would carry out and understand what you wanted.
Exactly.
If you can't speak for yourself. Now, if you can speak for yourself, you can share all that information.
Right. And so that's the other important part with proxies. Again, without getting too much into the medical legalese of it, sometimes they're ones that do not start until 2 physicians have determined that a patient does not have capacity. Sometimes they're ones that are enacted immediately. So there's all different variations. For questions along those lines, there's a lot of great elder care attorneys out there that really do this kind. Exactly. So I think it's worth mentioning again, 5 Wishes, that it's a great resource.
because it really does walk you through everything you sort of need to think about and understand, and just sort of, you know, in easy language, right? Because that's, we were talking about the medical jargon, and sometimes it gets kind of bogged down and you're not even sure, you know, how to have the conversation or what to ask.
Right. And ultimately it's good to have that conversation with your doctor, especially some of the folks that I see, they've had physicians they've been seeing for 10, 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
That's someone that's very good to have those conversations with, because in Maryland, some of those things are presented almost like an a la carte menu of items, when in reality, some of those things are done in conjunction with each other.
Right.
So for example, chest compressions and intubation, often those things are done very closely with each other, although they may be offered as separate items on a list. And that's why it's really best to check with your doctor at that point in time, review those things on a periodic basis, because at some point those may be things that are beneficial for you. At some point those are things that may no longer be beneficial for you.
So you as a physician, do you appreciate if somebody were to come in with like this?
Oh, very much so. It's great.
Because it gives you,
absolutely.
It totally doesn't make any guesswork on your part.
Right.
Like you just now know.
Right.
So if you guys are just joining us, I'm Tammy Turner. I'm the Community Education Manager here at Hospice of the Chesapeake, and I'm chatting today with Dr. Eric Bush, who's our Chief Medical Officer here at Hospice of the Chesapeake. And we're talking about making advanced care directives, healthcare decisions in advance. It's National Healthcare Decision Day. It's a really important thing to think about, and we've kind of, just to give you a quick summary, we've talked about that it doesn't matter really where you are in what stage of life, but it's helpful to do it throughout your life, throughout this journey, and at different stages, because your priorities, your wants and needs change over time. I wanted to talk a little bit about, so sometimes people feel like, okay, I've checked the box, I'm DNR, I'm covered. I think, and I can share, if I want to hear from you, but I can share a personal story about that too, but I think it's really helpful if you could clarify, what does that cover and what does it not cover?
Sure. So DNR means do not resuscitate. So that means if somebody were to code or their heart and breathing were to stop, those are not things where we would resuscitate that particular patient. However, that does not mean do not treat. Okay. So if you think that there's something acutely reversible that's there, and I see this in hospice every day, even in the inpatient setting where patients tend to be very ill, if there is something acute that's reversible, and I think I can get somebody to overcome that medically and get them back home with good quality of life, by all means, that's something that I would
intervene. Can you give me like a specific, can you give me an example of that?
Sure. So a patient with advanced or severe dementia that has not had behavioral issues, say that's on home hospice, and then has a urinary tract infection and starts developing a lot of agitation, a lot of behavioral issues, and has a precipitous decline. Often, if you can treat that, you will get them back closer to their baseline, where they may have had some quality of life and can spend some additional time with their family. So sometimes it's something as simple as that, and you know, people may think, oh well, they're the DNR, but to me, medically, it still makes sense to at least treat that urinary tract infection at that time, because clearly their baseline, even though they may be on hospice, they had some quality of life.
That makes sense. So I think sometimes, like I said, people go in, and I know with my parents went in thinking that they had everything covered by having a DNR. They were like, we're set. And then unfortunately, when my dad had a health emergency, my mom was his medical proxy, She wasn't available, so then it fell on me. And it was eye-opening to me, because from a medical perspective, the hospital was asking me all sorts of questions regarding different levels of his care that I wasn't prepared. I didn't know what his wishes were for that. So he was fortunately able to overcome at that point that medical emergency, but it really resonated with me as a loved one, that the importance of knowing what somebody wants and understanding that there's different levels.
Correct, absolutely. There's a lot of decisions to make, and that's why it says if you don't understand, ask your doctor to break it down into risk versus benefit for where you're at that point in time.
That's a really good point.
And for those out there that may be wondering, a MOLST is a Maryland Order for Life-Sustaining Treatment, which really falls under the category of generically POLST, or Physician Orders for Life-Sustaining Treatment, and that is considered a written advance directive.
Okay.
Part of it.
And I think you can find that.
You can find those online again.
Right.
And they do vary from state to state, as do things such as surrogacy laws from state to state, or if somebody does not have a proxy or decision maker, who in essence is the de facto next decision maker for that person. And so that's why it's always best to check within your state laws, because they do vary.
Right.
There is national legislation that started all this off called the Patient Self-Determination Act, passed back in 1991.
Okay.
Prior to that, really, California was the state that started to allow natural death back in 1977. So there's been an evolution of all this over time.
Right.
But again, to me, the most important thing about it is know what your wishes are, make those wishes known, have the conversation with your loved ones so your wishes get observed at the time that you need that done.
I know we have to wrap this up, we're almost out of time, but I just wanted to clarify. So if someone does a MOLST form, or a 5 wishes, could they do one or the other? Do they need to do both, or what's sort of the...
I think it would always be best to do both.
Okay.
While either or is binding, the more you can make your wishes known. As you noticed with your experience with your parents, it's better to have more information rather than less to help guide you.
And I think there's just so many, like you mentioned, there's so many, the a la carte, there's so many components that, I think people don't understand, like the DNR, they think it's more of an umbrella than what it really is. There's a lot more to it. So I agree. I wish my parents had the 5 wishes, so I'm a big advocate for it. After I had that experience with my parents, I came home and literally handed this booklet to my in-laws and was like, I need you guys to fill this out. So if you're having trouble having like that discussion, say you do have parents who need to you're not sure what their wishes are, I think the Conversation Project that you mentioned before is a great tool. It's online. You can access it and sort of gives you advice and guidance how to broach that conversation. So we'll be sure to put those resources, as I said, online for everybody. And we'll also, if you guys have additional, later questions, we're happy to answer those too offline. Thanks again for watching.
Great.
Thank you guys. Thank you.
Thanks.
For being here today. I really appreciate your time.
Great. Thank you. Thanks.